Hey, Ron here from Military Images Magazine with a new episode of Life on the Civil War Research Trail. Most of my research typically falls into the PG category. Sometimes I'll cross over into R rated. Today, a little different. I'm currently working on a story for the magazine that involves an obscure photographer who worked in Missouri, Kentucky, and Mississippi prior to the Civil War. This particular individual moved around a lot, leaving a trail of woes behind him, financial problems, and, surprising to me, an accusation of making obscene pictures. This gave me pause, and I thought, well, let me take a look on newspapers.com, my go to source to find out about old news reports and articles that might give me some sense of what the story was about around this photographer. Well, I wasn't able to find any additional details about this particular case, but I learned a heck of a lot about quote unquote obscene pictures during the 19th century. Here's some of the highlights. The first case that I discovered occurs in 1815 in Philadelphia. There's an episode where a man brings a book of quote unquote lewd engravings to a group. Everyone looks at this book. There's a lot of comments. There's people that object to it. Long story short, he lands in jail. Flash forward 35 years to Washington, D.C. There's a lady who commissions a portrait. The painter dutifully complies. She looks at the finished product and objects to the look. She refuses to pay. The painter retaliates by shaming her. He, quote, at once remodeled the original likeness into a ridiculous and obscene picture, placing a pipe in its mouth and otherwise shamefully disfiguring it. He then goes on to hang the portrait outside for public viewing. You can imagine what happens. She sues him for libel, and the rest is history. Now, to the Civil War period, I found a letter published in the Vicksburg Daily Whig. It was written by an individual only identified as a Dr. Cross. The publication date is March 24th, 1863. It's a gruesome firsthand description of the battlefield of Murfreesboro, also known as Stone's River, after the fighting ended. This Dr. Cross talks about what he saw, and I'm going to read this to you because it is pretty gruesome stuff. So here we go. Quote, after a pretty thorough inspection of the ground in the rear of our lines, from Stone's River to the extreme left, I ride to the front, where the dead lie thick among the cedars in the proportion of 5 Yankees to 1 Southron. Editor's note here. I can imagine where his sympathies are. Continuing on. Here are sights to sicken the bravest hearts and lessons for human passion and oppression. Here is a foot shot off at the ankle, a fine model for a sculptor. Here is an officer's hand severed from the wrist, the glove still upon it, and the sword still in its grasp. Here is an entire brain, perfectly isolated, showing no sign of violence, as if carefully taken from the skull that enclosed it by the hands of a skillful surgeon. Here's a corpse sitting upon the ground with its back against a tree, in the most natural position of life, holding before its face the photographic likeness of a good-looking old lady, probably the dead man's mother. Here is a poor fellow who has crawled into the corner of a fence to read his sister's letter and expired in the act of its perusal, the effect of the precious document still open before him, full of affectionate counsel. Here is a handsome young man with a placid countenance, lying upon his back, his Bible upon his bosom, and his hands over it, as if he had gone to sleep saying his evening prayer. Many others present the melancholy contrast of scattered cards, obscene pictures, and filthy ballad books. Miserable comforters for a dying hour, but an instructive commentary upon the Yankee cause. One lies upon his face, literally biting the ground, his rigid fingers fastened firmly into the gory sod. On another, with upturned face, open eyes, knit brow, compressed lips, and clenched fists, displays all the desperation of Yankee vengeance imprinted on his clay. Dissevered heads, arms, legs are scattered everywhere, and the coagulated pools of blood gleam ghastly in the morning sun. It is a fearful sight for Christian eyes. So there you have that article. Gruesome, a depiction of the gore laying strewn across the battlefield of Stones River. We often hear stories of Civil War photographs found on these battlefields and other literature, but this is the first time I've seen a reference to obscene pictures and ballad books. So the more investigation to be done on this really caught my attention and thought I would share it with you today, just because it's so unusual. Anyway, that's it for today. We'll see you next time on the trail.